And welcome everyone to today's call on training for coaches. Definitely excited to have you here. Based on the information you shared when you registered for our webinar today, we do have some good diversity in the group. So what I do want to share with you, a few things. First off, we are targeting those within the corporate or business setting that are looking at having coaches in their organization and exploring, okay, do we want to train coaches? Do we want to hire coaches? When we're training coaches, what kind of training is going to make sense? What do we want to think about? What are the considerations? So that is the focus. Hopefully that helps clarify. A couple of you had questions on that on the front end. As far as additional questions, for those that you submitted when you registered, I believe we have got those pretty much built into the webinar today and are addressing them. Of course, additional questions will come up. We absolutely invite you to ask. The way to do it, because this is a public webinar with lots of different people, everyone is unfortunately in the mute mode, which means what we want you to do is type in your questions. So we'll monitor the questions in the question panel throughout the webinar and make sure I'm responding to those. So absolutely invite you to that. Another common question I get is, gee, after the webinar today, will you have access to this information? So what I want to share with you is when we do webinars, we load them on our YouTube channel. All of you that registered for the webinar today will get a link to the recording on the YouTube channel. So it is coming to you, and of course you can link through the website as well. So thank you very much for being here. Excited about the conversation. Now, given that we have a short 30-minute schedule, we're going to move fairly quickly through this information. What is our agenda today? Well, when you are looking at having a coaching program in your organization, how important is coaching-specific training? Then, what kind of training is going to make sense based on what it is you want to accomplish? Is training different for internal and external coaches? And I did get a question on this. Somebody asked right away, gee, what is the difference between internal and external coaches? So let's answer that question right off the bat. The first thing I'll share with you, internal basically is somebody that works inside the company. They are coaching other people that work inside the company. External coaches are those that are hired from outside the company and brought in to do that coaching. Next, how do I choose the right training? So, of course, there are a number of considerations. We definitely want to talk about those. We'll share some resources for you and, of course, take any questions that you have. So welcome and thank you again for being here. So starting out with the question of how important is coach-specific training? And it's kind of funny that we are asking this, and it's such a common question. Gee, does a coach really have to be trained? Well, let me put it this way. If you personally are going to pay for a coach, do you care? Think about it this way. Do you care about their training, about their ethics? Do you care about confidentiality? Do you care whether or not they have a process for what they're doing? So just by asking yourself that question, in many ways, chances are you're actually answering the question. How important is it? Yeah, it's definitely important. Let's build further. Harvard Business Review actually did a study on this. Here's what they found. When people select a coach, they're looking for experience in a similar setting, and they're looking for a clear methodology. They went on to cite some statistics. 29% of the time, people think coaching, certification, and training is very important. 28% of the time, not at all. And the remainder assign a different level of importance to that training. So when you put that together, Harvard Business Review is putting out the number that about 70% of the time people do care about the training. How much they care ranges. It varies. Now, think about it this way as well. When you consider different professions, are they trained? Do you think training is important for them? Well, of course, training professionals get trained. As a matter of fact, there are certification programs for people that do training. Human resource professionals are trained. Again, they have certification. And of course we want them trained given what it is they're doing. Mental health professionals. You know, think about it this way. Years ago, a mental health professional didn't have to be trained. And now, oh my goodness, there's all kinds of regulation around that. Yes, they have to be trained. When you hire an image consultant, they have training and expertise in their area. Facilitators get trained. People that do conflict mediation get trained. So you have training for all kinds of professionals, and it almost becomes what is the reason we're even asking the question? When you are working with a coach, you're sharing a lot of personal information, you're working on goals, etc. It's important to know they have a process. It's important to know about the ethics and the confidentiality. So of course it makes sense. Coaching is a learned skill. It is different than other roles. You've probably seen some of the webinars where we talk about the difference between a coach and a mentor. Coaching is different than being a manager or supervisor. Yes, it's commonly misunderstood, and that speaks even more to the importance and the value of offering coach training. In addition to that, back to the Harvard Business Review study I had up earlier, when people have a coach, they want to know the coach has a process for what it is they do. Okay, what is coaching anyway? Well, let's go through the definition from the International Coach Federation. Coaching is partnering with clients. Partnering, okay, this is different. You see, if we mentor or we supervise and manage, our status, our role is very different. When you are a partner with somebody, that changes the dynamic in terms of what's happening. It's a thought-provoking and creative process. So yes, lots of thinking and exploring and coming up with new ideas and challenging ideas, etc. It inspires that individual to maximize their personal and professional potential. So the definition itself, to me, is very exciting. You got to love that definition. And in terms of what it is we're doing, if we're going to effectively partner with someone, does that take developing skills? You bet it does. Now, the American Management Association did a study, and here's what they said. Externally based methods of training are most strongly correlated with overall coaching success. And then it went on to say, though they are less often used. Well, it does make sense. When you have a company, they typically have a training department, and that training department puts together their program. Well, the bottom line is it's going to be more effective when the training program is outside of the organization for coaching. That's where you're going to see the results. What's the reason for that? Well, there are a lot of different competencies involved in coaching. And these are typically different. They're very different from a common understanding of many of these competencies because the application is different. So we're going to build this foundation. We're going to start from the ground up and build through what these competencies are, because when you have a training for coaches, this is incredibly significant. You want to make sure this is in place and part of what's happening. So the ICF, the International Coach Federation, publishes 11 core competencies. They have them set up in 4 different categories. The first one, building from the ground up, is setting the foundation. What are the competencies when you're setting the foundation? Well, they start with ethical guidelines. And the ethics for coaching are very, very different than the ethics in other areas in a key area. That's confidentiality and record keeping. So typically in an organization, the records belong to the company. Well, in coaching, that's unethical. So having that conversation, gee, what are the ethics around coaching? What does this mean? How does this apply? What do I do with this? It's also important to know that coaching agreement, what is it? What is the role of the coach? What is the role of the client? How do we manage this? How are we exchanging information, etc.? So very, very significant in terms of how different it is from typical roles and capacities within an organization. The next level of competency is called co-creating the relationship. trust and intimacy there. And think about it this way. When you have a coach that is inside the organization with internal training, are they aware of what's going on in terms of developing that trust and having that intimacy? You see, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. The politics get involved within the organization. The level in terms of the hierarchy of the organization is going to have a factor. And how are people going to really trust someone that they know is also working for the company, etc.? So developing that, and how do you do it effectively? Coaching presence is being present to the client. So without coach training, what happens is they're thinking about what's going on in the organization and what the process there is and how it works within the company, as compared to focus on what's going on with the client and how to help them be as effective as they want to be. Communicating effectively. So you've probably seen lots of different training programs on listening skills, questioning, and direct communication. The application is different in coaching. I'll give you one of my favorite examples. Think about questioning. There are some professions where the types of questions that are learned in terms of what to ask and how to ask it are intended to really focus and lead, direct people, etc. In coaching, the type of question we use is very, very different in terms of outcome and what's being sought with that. So the way we communicate is different in a coaching relationship. Next, facilitating learning and results. Well, creating awareness, designing actions, planning and goal setting, and accountability are the competencies in this category. When somebody is within an organization, yes, they're working with organizational goals, and that's important and incredibly significant. When you add the coach training, there's awareness of, hey, for effectively engaging this individual, focusing on their goals, what they want, and how they're moving there is going to support them in terms of being engaged and ultimately productive. And the training around these competencies obviously has a different approach. Now, another consideration. In the coaching space, the golden standard, if you will, is from the International Coach Federation. So when you look at a training, you want to know, is it approved by the International Coach Federation? So typically, a training program inside of a company is not going to have that. It's a different process. Some organizations have this approval, some don't. So looking for that is going to make sense. In an organization investing company dollars in training, another consideration is typically whether or not continuing education units are offered. So looking for that is going to make sense too. Now, back to some of the research, the studies. When surveyed, leaders in an organization indicated they actually prefer an external coach. This goes back to the trust and intimacy. It goes back to the rapport. It goes back to confidentiality and record keeping that we referenced earlier. Now let's think about what happens when a coach has training specific to coaching, addressing the ethics for a coach, addressing confidentiality, these other components, where the records are, how they're managed. It's going to start changing the level of confidence leaders in an organization have in their internal coaches. External coaches bring in the higher levels of confidentiality, different objectivity perspective because they're outside of the company. That does provide value. Now, let's build on this a little bit more because there are differences that we want to know in terms of internal and external coaches, and there's actually some very exciting perspective in terms of opportunity for internal coaches. So first off, do you want a coach to be trained and certified? And does that change whether or not they're internal or external? I'm going to say it's the same. You want them trained, you want them to have the competency, you're going to want them to have the ethics and the process in place. And that it holds true for both internal and external coaches. Bottom line, that's where you get the results. best practices, as with any profession, is to have the training, these things in place. Now, another consideration. You see, sometimes when you're using internal coaches, the only thing they talk about is the job, simply because that's what's politically correct. External coaches flex between either a job focus or what we call the whole person focus. Harvard Business Review did a study on this as well. They said 76% of the time in a coaching relationship intended to focus on the job, so it's an executive coaching relationship, personal issues get addressed. So what does whole person mean? It means that we are aware that when an individual has financial challenges, when they're struggling with health issues, when they've got personal things going on in relationships, it comes to work with them, and it does affect their performance on their job. So what does that mean to us? It means when we have a relationship where they are comfortable, they trust, they know that confidentiality is there, and we're protecting them, they have the ability to say, okay, this is an issue for me, and yeah, it comes to work with me, so it affects my focus and my productivity. And then we get to have that conversation and address it. Now, the other question is competing priorities. So for an internal coach, on the pro side, they're absolutely about the company and the productivity, they get the culture, etc. On the con side, they might be scrambling between company priorities and the priorities of the individual they're coaching. That can come into play, and this is going to be developed, addressed effectively, because with coach training, they'll have an awareness. Gee, what do I do? Where is my focus when I'm working with an individual? Confidentiality comes into play. So very often when you have a coach within a company, they're taking notes on a company computer, they're storing them, they're keeping them there, and then they're owned and accessible in that organization. So it becomes a question of confidentiality within the company. So what that leads to in terms of results is that external coaches working with them is going to indicate more likelihood or support more likelihood of a successful coaching experience, regardless of where the coach is at in the organization. And that goes back to the training and the ethics that an external coach is going to have in place. Now, fascinating, and here's where the opportunity is coming in. Internal coaches seem to be most effective at the supervisor level or below. They're cost effective, they're already familiar with things going on in the organization, and at that level it is effective. Now, additionally, with the training and with the build from that internal avenue of coaching, we're seeing increasingly internal coaches are effective at higher levels as well. Now, what is the difference for internal and external coaches? Well, consider these things. So in the coaching conversation we talk about, is it coaching process expertise or subject matter expertise that is most significant? And there's pros and cons here. Let's talk about the subject matter expertise for a moment. Here's what happens. When a coach has subject matter expertise, on the pro side, they get what the client is talking about. They know where to go in terms of questioning, that kind of thing. They know questions to ask. On the con side, if they have a lot of expertise, sometimes they go in with their own idea of this is how it should be done, and that actually directs the conversation, whether or not they're even aware of it. Alternatively, if a coach does not have subject matter expertise, it means, well, on the one hand, they might have to ask some questions, give her some basic information to get up to speed. On the other hand, sometimes those questions ensure clarity on the part of the client. In addition to that, where the coach has the ability to be up to speed very quickly, transferable skills, transferable expertise, if you will, it actually adds value by bringing in different perspectives. And most significantly, it means instead of coming in with, oh, I know how to handle this or do it, the coach is coming in with what we call coaching expertise, and that is putting that individual client in charge of figuring out their own answer. Now, in either case, internal and or external coaches, that expertise in terms of the coaching process is absolutely significant. Now, let's talk through what it means when you have that expertise. If you're going to have a coaching model, what do you want? What's the understanding of this relationship? So the model I'm going to share with you is what I call the staircase to success. This is the Center for Coaching Certification model. When you have a coaching relationship, the idea is we're going to build this staircase and reach what the client calls success, their doorway to success. When you build the staircase, you've got to have a foundation in place. Pretty difficult to just throw those steps up in midair and have them stay in place to climb up. So we start with the foundation. What is the foundation for an effective coaching relationship? Well, it starts with training, and yes, coach-specific training. From that and with that and continuing after that is developing and building on the competency of the coach. Of course, you want that code of ethics in place. That's foundational to the relationship. So this is your foundation for the staircase. Now we can start building steps. The first step is agreement. The agreement between the coach and the client. Hey, what is this relationship? What's your role? What's my role? How are we functioning? We do this in conversation, and then we do it in writing. Next, understanding. It is incumbent on the coach to understand the client. Who are they? How are they thinking, processing, and functioning? What are their priorities, and what's significant to them? So having that understanding means the coach is in a place to support that client, ask them questions that move them forward. And it creates rapport. The number one indicator of success in a coaching relationship is the rapport between the coach and the client. Well, how do you develop rapport? It's having that level of trust and intimacy. It's having that presence to who the client is and working with them based on who they are. When you have that in place, the effective communication is a natural follow-on. Listening both to what is said and what isn't said, clear, direct language that's respecting everyone involved, and powerful questioning, which gives you the step to exploration, because with those questions you're doing that exploration, which then leads to strategy for the client, how they're moving toward what they want. And this is supporting the client climbing up to the doorway called success, and that success is in fact defined by the client. So how do you actually choose the right training program? You're looking for quality, you're looking for value, and you got to be realistic. The logistics, how is this going to work? So let's address this. Quality. You want a program that's credible, that provides coaching tools, and that has professional development involved. So we're talking about ICF-approved credibility. We're talking about, gee, what does this training program provide in terms of those coaching tools? Ask that question and find out. And are you getting those professional development units that so many of the employees are required to have anyway? Next, what about, oh yes, good old cost. So let's look at some of the comparisons. You've got hundreds of choices for training programs. They're offered all over the place. So here's what happens. Some programs are going to be a few hours. Other programs are 10 years. Okay, what's realistic? For effectively training a coach so that they can start coaching effectively, we have what we call the Certified Professional Coach Program. It's 30 hours. Now, we also offer for those looking for more advanced training, the Certified Master Coach Program. Now, location. Some programs are online, some programs require travel. Your ideal, obviously, is looking, if you're offering a training at your company, for someone that can come there. So, yes, we have training that's available in your location, in your area, may be an option depending on where you live, because we have locations around the country. And we also do it online if that works for you in terms of scheduling and logistics. Now, typical training programs are going to range from $400 to $20,000 per person. Our training program is $14.95. Depending on the volume and the size of the group, that's a conversation we have with you as well. Now, what else is important in choosing training? Well, think about the concept of it being outside training. You see, if it's inside training, is it going to be unique and specific to what you're looking for? Probably not. The other thing is it going to engage? You see, most often when you're offering a coach training, you're training leaders to be the coaches. That means engaging them at that higher level with something that is unique and specific to what you're talking about. Very important in choosing a training program. Now, what are the resources for you? Well, bottom line, that's one of the reasons we're here. Interested in being a resource for you. How can I make that happen easily for you? Here's the way it works. Give me a call, send me an email within the next 24 hours. I will give you a link to my calendar. You may choose a 30-minute time block on my calendar and have that 30 minutes for free. Whether you want to train coaches, hire a coach, or because you're looking for program support to have a coaching program or create a coaching culture within your organization. Definitely want to be a resource for you. The coach training that I've mentioned and referred to during today's conversation is with the Center for Coaching Certification. Now, questions and answers. Here's what I'm doing. You've got my email address here. The websites are here for both organizations. Our 800 phone numbers are available on those websites. Give me a call, send me an email, and I will email you the link to my calendar. In the meantime, looking to take your questions in terms of what is of most interest and greatest value for you. And please do type those in on the question panel. And by the way, those of you that are typing in thank you, I want to say thank you as well. I do realize we're just pushing up against our 30 minutes and that a number of you have additional things scheduled. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing your homework. Definitely appreciate it and definitely interested in being of service. So thank you for those of you who are headed out. Some of the questions coming in, let's start addressing that. So one question I've got is, please tell me more about the ICF, the International Coach Federation. And yeah, that's a long one to type out. Okay. So the International Coach Federation, excuse me, I mentioned is the gold standard in the coaching profession. So the bottom line is this: coaching is moving toward either self-regulating or government's going to step in and regulate. What's behind that move? It's pretty much like what every profession before us has gone through. Doctors went through this. It used to be if you wanted to be a doctor hundreds of years ago, you just said, I'm a doctor, and you started being a doctor. Now, is that okay? Of course not. There's a lot of training involved. The same is true of attorneys. The same is true of counselors and therapists. The same is now true of coaches. So as the profession has grown, what we've seen happen is people say, hey, I'm a coach, I do coaching. And because they're lacking in terms of the training, they're doing other things. They're practicing therapy without a license, etc., and they're getting sued. There was actually a study done by the ICF, and the number one threat to the coaching profession is untrained coaches. They simply don't know what they don't know. Now, their intentions, they want to help people generally. They're very well intentioned. They're simply unaware. So the International Coach Federation is working very hard in terms of self-regulation. So the bottom line is this: if we successfully self-regulate as a profession, and I think we're right on the brink for that, it's going to be through the International Coach Federation. They are a nonprofit membership organization. They are very similar to ASPD and SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. Just guessing that most of the people on the call are familiar with those organizations. So they're a professional membership organization. They have the 11 core competencies. They also offer the code of ethics, and members are actually held accountable to that code of ethics. In addition to standards to become a member of the organization, they also offer additional credentialing. So again, very similar to other professional membership organizations. They are a nonprofit. So in terms of coaching, as a professional coach, when you hire somebody, ask them, are you a member of the ICF? This is significant. As a matter of fact, I think it's kind of funny. My professional insurance company asked me if I was a member. So it's a very important factor for people. It is the gold standard. Now, if government happens to step in and regulate, guess what's going to happen? The first thing they'll do, if you look at what they did in other professions, they'll go to the ICF and say, gee, how should we handle this regulation? So the International Coach Federation is that nonprofit membership organization. It's the largest one of coaches in the U.S. and internationally as well. There are a couple of other big ones in different parts of the world. In terms of the entire globe, the International Coach Federation is going to be the biggest. It's definitely something to know about, be aware of, and look at and research in terms of what the standards are. So great question there. And I, again, appreciate the thank yous. I believe we have answered all of your questions based on what I'm seeing. And I do want to respect and honor your time. We went over a few minutes. So everyone, thank you so much for your time and your participation today. Definitely look forward to being of service. Each month we do another 30-minute program for you, so we are looking forward to you in the next one as well. And in the meantime, do let us know how we can be helpful, and go ahead and send out that request for that 30-minute session. So thank you all.